The snow had been falling since before dawn, and by 6:45 in the morning, it had turned Boston into something unrecognizable, a white, blurred city where traffic lights swayed in the wind and nothing moved the way it was supposed to. Ethan Cole sat behind the wheel of his 2011 Honda Accord and watched the dashboard clock like it was a countdown to something he couldn't stop. 6:47. He needed to be at his desk by 7:30. The Norcross Corporation logistics floor didn't tolerate lateness, not under any circumstances, and especially not for him. 2 written warnings in the past 4 months. The first one in September, when Lily's school had called about a fever, and he'd had to leave early to pick her up. The second in November, when the sitter had canceled with an hour's notice, and he'd scrambled for 40 minutes to find someone to stay with his daughter before racing across 3 miles of gridlock traffic. Both times, his supervisor Greg Turner had handed him the warning paperwork with the expression of a man stamping documents, no eye contact, no conversation, just the flat efficiency of someone administering policy. One more incident. Greg had said both times, as though the phrase were a recorded message, "And we will have to let you go." Ethan had nodded. He had thanked the man. He had gone back to his desk and worked an extra hour that evening without telling anyone. That was who Ethan Cole was. 34 years old, 8 years in logistics, 4 of them at Norcross. Father of 1, Lily, age 8. With brown eyes exactly like her mother's, and a habit of falling asleep with library books still open across her chest. He had raised her alone for the past 3 years, since Clara had died of a brain hemorrhage on an ordinary Tuesday in March. The kind of death that gave no warning and left no explanation behind, just a hole in the shape of a woman that everything else now had to arrange itself around. The job at Norcross wasn't glamorous. It was spreadsheets and freight manifests, coordination calls with warehouse managers in 3 time zones, a cubicle under fluorescent lights that flickered every time someone walked past them. But it paid well enough. More importantly, it came with health insurance that covered Lily's asthma management and the prescriptions she needed every month, and it offered a small tuition benefit that Ethan was using to keep her in her current school, where she had friends and a teacher she trusted. He could not lose this job. The Accord moved slowly up Tremont Street. The clock read 6:51. He was doing the math, 12 traffic lights between him and the Norcross parking garage. And if every single one cooperated, he might possibly arrive with 5 minutes to spare when he saw her. She was standing at the shoulder of the road, maybe 20 yards ahead, beside a silver Mercedes that sat at an angle he could tell immediately was wrong. The hazard lights blinked orange through the falling snow. She was wearing a dark wool coat, but no hat, no gloves, and her posture was the posture of someone who had been standing in freezing wind for a while and had run out of ways to make themselves smaller against it. She was visibly, heavily pregnant. Ethan's foot touched the brake before his mind made a conscious decision. He registered the situation in pieces, the way the brain does when it's processing too many things at once. Woman, alone, 3rd trimester. Stopped car, no one else pulling over. Temperature 17 degrees, wind chill making it feel like 4. The clock said 6:53. He thought about Lily. He thought about the insurance card in his wallet with the Norcross logo printed at the top. He thought about Greg Turner's voice, flat and procedural. One more incident, then he pulled over. He told himself later that it wasn't heroic. It wasn't even a particularly difficult decision. In the end, it was just that when he pictured himself driving past, when he ran that scenario forward in his mind and watched himself press the accelerator and watched the woman recede in his rearview mirror, her arms wrapped around her belly against the cold, he found he simply could not do it. Not because he was a saint, because he was a father, because he knew, in some part of himself that didn't deal in risk-benefit calculations, that a world where he drove past that woman was not a world where he deserved to keep anything worth keeping. He put the car in park, left the engine running, and stepped out into the snow. The cold hit him like a wall. He crossed the distance between his car and the Mercedes at a half jog, one arm raised against the wind. Up close, the woman was younger than he'd expected, mid-30s, dark hair plastered against her face from melted snow, cheeks red from the cold. Her eyes were a sharp, watchful gray, and when she saw him approaching, they didn't soften immediately. She assessed him. That was the word for it. She was frightened and freezing, and still she was assessing him, taking him in with an efficiency that registered somewhere in the back of Ethan's mind as unusual. "Car died," she said before he reached her. Her voice was controlled, though her teeth were chattering slightly at the edges of the words. "Roadside service says 40 to 60 minutes. That's too long to stand out here." He gestured toward his car. "Come wait inside. It's warm." She didn't move immediately. "I'm Ethan Cole," he said. "I work in logistics. I have a daughter. I'm completely harmless." Something shifted in her expression, not quite amusement, but an awareness of his attempt at reassurance. "Victoria Hale," she said, and reached for his arm to steady herself on the ice. He got her into the passenger seat carefully, one hand on her elbow, one hand on the car door. She sat heavily and let out a long breath. And for a moment, she just rested her hands on her belly and said nothing. Ethan turned the heat up. The vents pushed warm air into the car. Outside, the snow came down in thick curtains. "How far along?" he asked, because it seemed like the only question that mattered right now. 32 weeks. She paused. "I had a checkup this morning." "That's where I was going." He nodded. The clock on the dashboard read 6:59. He reached for his phone and sent a message to Greg Turner's work email. "Emergency, on road. Running late. Apologize in advance." It was a futile gesture, and some part of him knew it, but he sent it anyway. "You can go," Victoria said. She was watching him. "I have roadside coming. In 40 minutes. In this temperature." He shook his head. "My mother would not forgive me." She looked at him for a moment longer than was comfortable, and then she looked away, out through the snow-blurred windshield. "You'll be late for something," she said. It was not a question. "Probably. Does that matter?" He thought about answering honestly, and then decided there was no point in lying to a stranger sitting in his car. "More than I'd like it to," he said. She was quiet. The heater hummed. The hazard lights of her Mercedes continued to blink, patient and orange, through the white. "My daughter's name is Lily," he said, because the silence had weight, and he wanted to put something real into it. "She's 8. She likes dinosaurs and books about space, and she cannot eat strawberries without her face turning into a medical situation." Victoria made a small sound, not quite a laugh, something warmer than that. "I've been doing this alone for 3 years, he continued, not sure why he was talking, only knowing that he was. "It gets easier. I don't know if that's true, or just something people say, but it's what I keep going with." She turned back to look at him then, and the assessment in her gray eyes had changed into something different. Something slower. "How did you manage?" she asked. "The first year. Badly," he said simply, "and then less badly. And then eventually you realize you've built a life, even if it looks nothing like the one you'd planned." The roadside truck arrived 38 minutes later. By then, the windows had fogged completely from the warmth inside the car, and they had really talked about pregnancy, about solo parenthood, about Boston winters, and the strange compressed intimacy of being stranded somewhere with a stranger who turned out not to be a stranger at all. Or at least not entirely. When Victoria stepped back out into the cold to meet the mechanic, she paused with her hand on the door frame and looked back at him. "Thank you, Ethan Cole," she said, carefully, like she was filing the name away. He drove to work already, knowing what he would find when he got there. He walked into the Norcross building at 8:14, 44 minutes late. The logistics floor was already in full operation. The low, steady noise of keyboards and phone calls, and the particular hum of a workplace that runs on precision and schedule. Several of his colleagues glanced up when he came through the door, and glanced away quickly in the way people do when they already know something. Greg Turner was waiting at the entrance to his office. He was a man built for the architecture of bureaucracy, square shoulders, graying temples, the kind of neat, expensive haircut that communicated someone who had learned to signal competence through externals. He held a manila folder in one hand. He didn't look surprised. "My office," he said, Ethan sat across from him. He did not take off his coat. "I sent you an email," Ethan said. "I received it." Greg opened the folder without looking at it. "This is your third documented incident of tardiness in a 4-month period. Company policy is clear. There was a pregnant woman stranded on Tremont in the storm. 17 degrees, no shelter. Ethan." Greg's voice was not unkind. It was simply closed, like a door that had already been locked from the other side. "That has no bearing on my position here. I understand that. But I want you to understand what actually happened this morning. What happened this morning is that you were 44 minutes late to your shift. That is the third such occurrence. I have a responsibility to apply policy consistently." He slid a single piece of paper across the desk. "You chose a stranger over your responsibilities here. I can't make exceptions based on the nature of the choice." Ethan looked at the paper. He did not pick it up. "You chose a stranger over your job," Greg continued. "Now you have neither." Ethan stood. He did not say anything. He went to his cubicle and put his personal items into a small cardboard box, a photograph of Lily taken at the Natural History Museum, her mouth open in astonishment at a Brachiosaurus skeleton, a coffee mug she had made for him in art class, with the word "Dad" painted in orange letters that had run slightly in the kiln. A small cactus he had kept alive for 2 years through willful optimism. He carried the box out past his colleagues, who found important things to look at on their screens. He said nothing. They said nothing. The elevator doors closed. Outside, the snow had stopped. The sky had gone a pale, washed-out silver, the kind of light that makes everything look recently abandoned. He put the box in his back seat and sat in the driver's seat without starting the car. He thought about Lily's prescription. He thought about the tuition benefit, which would end at the close of the current semester. He thought about the savings account, which had enough in it for 3 months if he was careful, and 4 if he was very careful, and he never was careful enough. Then he put his forehead against the steering wheel and stayed like that for a long time. He didn't regret stopping for Victoria Hale. That was the thing that kept surprising him as he sat there in the parking garage with the cold seeping back into the car. He turned the decision over and over and could not find the part where he would have done it differently. He was broke now and scared, and sitting in a cold parking garage with a box of his belongings. And he still could not make himself regret it, which was either a sign of profound integrity or profound stupidity. And he was honestly not sure which. He started the car and drove home. The next 2 days were the particular kind of misery that looks ordinary from the outside. He woke up on time out of habit, made Lily's breakfast, walked her to school, came home and sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, and sent applications to 14 logistics companies in the greater Boston area. He received 2 automated rejections and heard nothing from the other 12. He called his sister in Portland, who told him he could stay with her if things got bad, which he appreciated but could not accept because uprooting Lily from her school was not an option he would entertain unless the alternative was literally sleeping outside. On the evening of the second day, someone knocked at his front door. He opened it to find a woman in her early 40s, well-dressed in a charcoal blazer, carrying a leather portfolio. She had a professional composure that suggested she did not often find herself knocking on doors in residential neighborhoods. "Ethan Cole? My name is Margaret Dean. I'm the head of human resources at Norcross Corporation. May I come in?" He stepped back from the door automatically. The way you do when someone delivers news, you make space for it. She sat at his kitchen table without removing her coat. He offered coffee, and she declined. She placed the leather portfolio on the table between them and folded her hands on top of it. "Mr. Cole, I'll come directly to the point. Your termination has been reviewed at the executive level. It has been determined that the process was handled in a manner inconsistent with certain company values, and the decision has been reversed." He stared at her. "Reversed?" "Yes. You are being reinstated. Effective immediately, with full back pay for the 2 days of absence." She opened the portfolio. "Additionally, there is a role being offered to you. It's a significant change from your current position. A promotion, essentially, to the executive floor. The title is Senior Executive Coordinator. Reporting directly to the office of the CEO, Ethan leaned back in his chair. The kitchen felt very still. The compensation package includes a salary increase of roughly 60% over your previous rate, full medical and dental coverage for yourself and your daughter, and a tuition assistance benefit with no semester cap. Margaret Dean looked up from the portfolio. There's also an enrollment credit for Lily's school. Retroactive to September. He was quiet for a long moment. Why? He finally said. The request came from the CEO's office. The CEO doesn't know who I am. Margaret Dean's expression held something careful in it, something measured. The CEO requested that I relay the following: that she is very much aware of who you are, and that she hopes you'll accept. Ethan looked at the paper in front of him, at the name at the top of the document, at the signature line at the bottom. Victoria Hale, Chief Executive Officer, Norcross Corporation. He sat with that for a long time. Then he signed. The executive floor of Norcross Corporation occupied the entire 32nd level of the building, and it bore no resemblance to the logistics floor where Ethan had spent 4 years of his life. The carpet was a deep charcoal gray. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, looking out over Boston Harbor. The furniture was the kind that exists at the intersection of extreme comfort and extreme expense. And the air itself felt different, quieter, somehow, and filtered. A young assistant named Preston met Ethan at the elevator and walked him down a corridor lined with abstract art and frosted glass partitions to a set of double doors at the end. Preston knocked twice, opened the door, and stepped aside. The office beyond was large and ordered and full of winter light. Books lined one wall, real books, not decorative ones, with cracked spines and dog-eared pages. A wide desk sat in front of the window. Behind it, with a phone held to her ear and a pen moving across a document in her other hand, sat Victoria Hale. She was wearing a navy dress. Her dark hair was pulled back. She looked nothing like the woman who had stood shivering at the edge of Tremont Street in a borrowed windstorm. And she looked exactly like her. She saw him. She finished the sentence she was saying into the phone, said she would call back, and set the phone down. The pen went down beside it. She stood carefully, still heavy with the pregnancy, and came around the desk. Ethan did not speak. "You look like you're trying to decide if this is real," she said. "I'm trying to decide," he said honestly, "whether I should say something professional or just be a person." The corner of her mouth moved. "Be a person. I didn't know who you were," he said. "When I stopped the car, I had no idea. I know that." She sat on the edge of the desk. "That's rather the point. So this is not charity," she said. Before he could finish the sentence, she could clearly see coming. Her voice had an edge of precision to it, the kind that came from years of preempting the wrong interpretation of her actions. "I have run this company for 11 years. In that time, I have met a remarkable number of people who behave well when they know I'm watching, and differently when they think no one important is." She paused. "You were 44 minutes late and facing termination. The temperature was 17 degrees. No one else stopped." He said nothing. "I've been watching people for a long time," she continued. "You learn to recognize something rare when you see it. I wanted to meet the man who risked everything for nothing in return." She held his gaze. "And I wanted him working for me." Ethan stood in the winter light of her office and thought about the parking garage and the box in his back seat, and Lily asking him at dinner the previous night if everything was okay, in the way 8-year-olds ask when they already sense the answer. He thought about how he had told her, "Yes, sweetheart, everything is going to be fine," and how he had meant it, but also been terrified of it. "I'll take the job," he said. Victoria nodded, as though she had already known. The work itself surprised him. He had expected the executive floor to feel performative the way power often does when you're new to standing near it. But Victoria Hale ran her office the way she ran herself, efficiently, without theater, with an attention to the actual substance of things that cut through most of the noise that accumulated around a company of Norcross's size. She was brilliant in a way that was evident not through display, but through outcome, the problems she solved, the people she read accurately, the decisions she made, that only revealed their wisdom 3 or 4 months after the fact. Ethan learned fast. He was organized by nature and by the habit of solo parenting, which required a person to maintain 17 invisible systems simultaneously or watch everything collapse at once. He managed her schedule, her correspondence, the coordination between her office and the 7 departments that reported to it. He was good at the work. He was surprised, a little, to discover that he was good at it. What he hadn't expected was her. Not the professional version, that one he understood quickly enough. What surprised him was the version that appeared in the margins of the work, in the 10 minutes before a meeting when the office was quiet, in the late afternoons when the harbor light came in at an angle that softened everything. Victoria, without her armor, was different. Not softer, exactly. More present. She talked to him one Thursday evening in February, while he was organizing papers at the small desk outside her office, and she was eating an apple and looking at a file she'd clearly already read twice. It started with a question about Lily, whether she had recovered from the cold she'd had the week before, and somewhere in the middle of his answer something shifted, the way it does when a conversation stops being a conversation and becomes something else. She told him about the pregnancy. Not the logistics of it, he knew those from her medical schedule, but the why. "I was with someone for 4 years, she said. "I thought we were building towards something. Turned out he was building toward a very different set of things. Using resources he had access to, through me." She said it flatly, without inflection, the way people describe something that has been processed past the point of pain and into the territory of fact. "When I found out, I was 38. I had been so busy protecting the company from risk that I had never protected myself from it." She looked at the file in her hands. "I still wanted to be a mother. I decided I didn't need to wait for someone to decide they wanted it with me." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "That took courage," he said. "Not the polished kind of statement. Just the true kind. It took stubbornness," she said. "I'm not sure those are always different things." He told her about Clara. Not the grief that would have been too much for an ordinary evening, but the life. How they had met at a logistics conference in Chicago. How she had laughed at his opening line, which was terrible, and agreed to dinner anyway. How she had made Lily's baby room in shades of yellow because she thought all babies deserved to grow up around the color of sunlight. How she had been so completely present in the world that her absence from it still sometimes registered as a kind of spatial error, a room you walk into expecting furniture that isn't there. Victoria listened without interrupting. She asked one question at the end. "Does Lily remember her? She was 5 when Clara died," he said. "She remembers pieces. I try to keep her alive in them." "That's the right thing," Victoria said. They looked at each other across the evening-lit office. The city moved quietly below the glass. Later, walking to his car, Ethan realized something had shifted in the architecture of things, some structural element that would determine everything that came after. He walked carefully. The way you do, when you sense the ground, is different than it was. It happened on a Thursday in late March, at 11 minutes past midnight. Ethan was asleep when his phone rang. He answered it without looking at the screen, some parental reflex keeping him alert even in sleep. "Ethan." Victoria's voice was controlled, but only just. "Something is wrong." He was in his car in 4 minutes. She had called 911 already. The pain had started 2 hours before, and she had managed it. Because managing things was how she was built, until she couldn't manage it anymore. When he arrived at her apartment building, her doorman was already holding the lobby door open, and she was seated in the lobby chair with one hand pressed flat against her side, and her face a color that frightened him. "I can walk," she said when he moved to help her. "I know you can," he said, and helped her anyway. The drive to Mass General was 12 minutes. He did it in 9. The hospital received her immediately. She was 35 weeks, presenting with abdominal pain and early contractions, and the obstetrics team moved with a precision that was both reassuring and terrifying, because you understood, watching it, that they had seen this before, and knew what it could mean. Ethan sat in a chair in the waiting area and did not move. He texted his neighbor, who had a key to his apartment and had agreed, when he explained the situation quickly at midnight, to stay with Lily. His neighbor had said, "Of course. Go. Go." He was grateful for that. He held the gratitude in his chest alongside the fear and let them coexist. At 2 in the morning, a doctor came to find him. He stood up. "She's asking for you," the doctor said. Her voice was careful. "The baby," he read the rest in the pause before the sentence finished. "The baby, Noah, was born at 2:17 in the morning, 6 weeks early and 4 pounds 11 ounces. And he was in the NICU within minutes, and the machines around him were doing work his lungs were not yet ready to do alone." Ethan sat beside Victoria's bed and held her hand while she was still medicated and half-conscious, and she gripped his fingers with a strength that told him the medication was not doing everything it was supposed to. Noah lived for 9 days. He held on longer than the doctors had initially believed he would, which gave them a window of something hope, or at least the suspension of despair that made the end, when it came, more acute than it might have been. Victoria had spent those 9 days in a way Ethan could only describe as total. She was completely there. Every visit, every hour she was allowed, talking to him, reading to him, playing music on her phone that she held near his isolette. She was never not present. The 9th day was a Tuesday. Ethan had known since that morning, from the look on the doctor's face, that the day was going to be the last. He stayed. When it was over, he did not leave. He sat beside Victoria in the room the hospital provided. A small room with a soft lamp and a box of tissues, and the particular terrible privacy of a place designed for this exact kind of grief. She did not cry immediately. She sat with her hands in her lap and her face very still, and she was so quiet that the quiet itself became a sound. Then something broke in her, slowly, and then all at once, and Ethan put his arms around her. A woman he had known for 4 months. A woman who had given him back his livelihood and changed his life. A woman who was now losing the most important thing, and he held her and said nothing because there was nothing to say, and sometimes the only true and useful thing one human being can do for another is simply to refuse to go. He refused to go. Spring came slowly that year, the way it does in Boston, in suggestions rather than declarations. A few degrees warmer here, a patch of ground visible there, the sky shifting from the flat white of February to something with actual blue in it. Victoria did not return to work immediately. She did not return to herself immediately. Grief has its own schedule, indifferent to the plans of organized and capable people. And she moved through the weeks in a way that was not recovery, but was something adjacent to it, the slow, difficult process of continuing to exist. Ethan came. Every day, or close to it, he brought food, because she was not eating with any discipline, and he brought work that required her attention, because it gave her something concrete to hold on to, and sometimes he brought Lily, on the weekends, because Lily had an unself-conscious quality that adults in grief often find oddly stabilizing. The first time, Lily walked into Victoria's living room, assessed the woman sitting on the couch, with the focused attention of a child who has already learned that some adults need to be approached carefully, and then climbed up beside her and said, "My dad makes really good grilled cheese. Do you want some?" Victoria looked at her for a long moment. "Yes," she said. Her voice was rough at the edges. "I think I would." Ethan stood in the kitchen doorway and watched his daughter settle herself beside a woman in mourning, with the same matter-of-fact gentleness she brought to everything, and felt something in his chest loosen that had been tight for a long time. The three of them ate grilled cheese sandwiches on the couch that afternoon. Nobody talked very much. The afternoon light came in through the windows and lay across the floor in long panels. And it was quiet, in the particular way that means something rather than nothing. A few weeks later, on an evening in mid-April, Ethan stayed after Lily had fallen asleep in Victoria's guest room. It had become a habit, the weekend visits, something none of them had named yet, but all of them seemed to need. He was washing dishes in her kitchen when she came and stood in the doorway. "I talked to the doctor today," she said. "He said the depression is normal, that I should let myself feel it rather than manage it." "Are you?" I'm trying. She leaned against the doorframe. It's not my nature. I know. He turned off the tap. Managing is what you do. It's how you survive. It's also how you miss things. She looked at her hands. Noah was 9 days old. I was there for every minute of those 9 days. I'm glad I was, but I keep thinking about all the minutes I spent before, managing things instead of. She stopped. He waited. Instead of being present, she said. The way you are. The way you've always been. Even when you were sitting in a car at 7 in the morning running late for a job you couldn't afford to lose. He dried his hands. The kitchen was quiet. You don't have to figure all of it out right now, he said. You just have to get through today, and then tomorrow. She looked at him across the kitchen, and whatever she saw in his face made some careful, constructed thing in her expression come down. I know, she said. I'm just glad you're here while I do it. You don't have to be alone anymore. He didn't say it. But it was there in the room with them, as present as the light, as quiet as everything they had not yet found words for. It didn't happen dramatically. That was perhaps the thing that surprised Ethan most. In retrospect, that a love that would end up being the most significant of his adult life arrived not as an event, but as an accumulation. A Tuesday in May when she laughed at something he said, genuinely and entirely. And he realized he hadn't heard her laugh like that before. A Saturday morning in early June when Lily asked Victoria to help her with a book report about migratory birds, and Victoria sat at the kitchen table for an hour and a half, genuinely engaged, pulling up satellite tracking data on her laptop with the same focused intensity she brought to quarterly earnings. A Thursday evening when she brought him coffee without being asked and set it down beside his work without a word, and the naturalness of the gesture told him something neither of them had said out loud. He said it, eventually, on an evening in late June, standing on her apartment's small balcony while Boston hummed quietly below them. He didn't plan the moment. It arrived the way true things do when you've finally stopped managing your way around them. I'm in love with you, he said. I've been trying to be respectful of your timing. But I think you should know. She was looking at the city. She didn't look at him immediately. I know, she said. Okay, she stopped. I was afraid of it. I'm still afraid of it. The last time I let myself need someone, it cost me significantly. I know, you're not that person, she said. It sounded less like a reassurance, and more like a conclusion arrived at through extended analysis. You are quite provably not that person. I watched you sit in a hospital for 9 days without being asked. I watched you make grilled cheese with my daughter. She's my daughter, he said. Your daughter is Noah. She was quiet for a moment. Yes, she said. And whoever else, he said carefully. If you want that. She turned to look at him then. The evening light was behind her, and her face was difficult to read. But her eyes were not. I'm afraid, she said again. Me too, he said. I've been afraid of this since February, probably. Hasn't stopped me from being here every day. She looked at him for a long time, and then she closed the distance between them. And the first time they kissed it was slow and deliberate. The way things are when they matter, when two people have taken a long road to reach a single moment and want to arrive at it properly. Lily accepted Victoria with a 7-year-old's pragmatic grace. She had decided, somewhere around the grilled cheese afternoon, that this was a person worth having around. And she adjusted accordingly. She asked Victoria questions about her job with genuine curiosity. She showed her the dinosaur exhibits at the Natural History Museum with the authority of a tour guide who had memorized every placard. She fell asleep on Victoria's couch during movie nights and didn't wake up when Ethan carried her to the guest room on a Sunday in September. In the same office where Ethan had first stood and understood that the woman who had shivered in his car was the woman who ran the company. He asked Victoria to marry him. He had no ring, he'd ordered one, but it was delayed, which was, he told her, a very fitting metaphor for his life in general. He had a speech he'd been composing in his head for weeks and promptly forgot when he was actually standing in front of her. I want to build something with you, he said. That's what I've got. I want to build a family with you and Lily and whoever else shows up. And I want to do it honestly and imperfectly. And I want to be there for every single day of it." Victoria looked at him with those gray eyes that had assessed him once on a snowy road and found something there worth saving. "Yes," she said. "Obviously yes. Did you think I would say anything else? Statistically, I knew it was likely. It was inevitable," she said. "From the moment you pulled over, they were married in January, on a Saturday with snow on the ground and thin winter sunlight coming through the windows of the small chapel where they had agreed, unanimously, that the ceremony would be intimate, just family, just the people who had actually been present for the accumulation." Lily walked down the aisle ahead of them and dropped flower petals with a precision that suggested she had practiced. Margaret Dean from HR cried despite her professional composure. Preston, the assistant, did not cry but was visibly emotional. Outside afterward, the snow was falling in the gentle, unhurried way it does when it has all the time in the world. The second pregnancy arrived as a surprise. Not a shock. Victoria was 39 now, and they had talked about this, carefully and honestly, the way they talked about everything. She had said she wanted to try, and Ethan had said he was here, whatever happened. And they had both known that whatever happened was the operative phrase. The losses of the first pregnancy had not erased the wanting. They had made the wanting more precise. When the test came back positive in April, she stood in the bathroom doorway and handed it to him without speaking. He looked at it. He looked at her. "Okay," he said. "Okay." She agreed. The fear returned, as they had known it would. It was different from the first time, less innocent, more specific, informed by knowledge of what loss actually felt like when you were living inside it. Victoria, who had always managed fear by converting it into productivity, found that this particular fear resisted that conversion. It stayed present. It stayed real. Ethan stayed more present than it. Every appointment, every late-night worry, every morning when she woke up and needed 30 seconds to locate herself before she could begin the day, he was there. Not with reassurance, which would have been hollow. With presence, which was the only thing that was actually true. At 20 weeks, the baby was healthy. At 25 weeks, still healthy. At 30 weeks, she was measuring well and moving frequently, and had, according to the ultrasound technician, a distinct personality. "She's already stubborn," Victoria said, watching the screen. "She has exceptional role models," Ethan said. Victoria looked at him. "Both of them," he clarified. She was 33 weeks when she told him, one night in late November, that she was not afraid anymore. Not in the way she had been. The fear was still there. She was not naive enough to believe it would entirely leave, but it had changed shape. It had become something she could hold alongside hope, rather than something that displaced it. He lay beside her in the dark and thought about all of it. The morning on Tremont Street. The box of his belongings in the back seat of his car. The door to Victoria's office. Opening. 9 terrible days in a NICU. Lily and grilled cheese. A kitchen, an evening, a balcony, and the slow arrival of love. A life, accumulated. Not the one he had planned. Better than the one he had planned. Their daughter was born on a Thursday in February, healthy and loud, 6 pounds 14 ounces, with gray eyes that matched her mother's and a grip that matched her father's. They named her Noah. They had talked about this carefully, too, whether it was right, whether it would carry too much weight, whether it honored rather than borrowed. In the end, Victoria had said, he existed, he was real, he was the first, and Ethan had said, then she carries his name forward. That's what names are for. The day they brought her home, a Saturday in February, there was snow on the ground outside their apartment building. Not a storm, just the quiet kind. The kind that falls when there's nothing urgent to say, covering the city in a white that made everything look washed and new. Lily stood at the window of the living room with her hands pressed flat against the glass and watched it fall. It's snowing, she said, to no one in particular. It is, Ethan said. He was beside Victoria on the couch, their daughter between them, wrapped in a blanket, the pale yellow of Clara's old nursery. That's what it was doing, Lily said, when you stopped for her. Ethan looked at her. The day everything changed, Lily clarified. with the serene certainty of an 8-year-old who had listened carefully to a story told in pieces over a long time and had assembled the whole from the parts. It was snowing. Ethan looked at the snow outside the window. He thought about the dashboard clock, counting down. He thought about the moment his foot had touched the brake before his mind had decided anything. Yes, he said, it was snowing. Victoria was watching him. Noah was sleeping between them. Her tiny face tilted toward the warmth. "Are you glad you stopped?" Lily asked. He looked at his daughter, and then at his wife, and then at the new and small person between them, who had not yet opened her eyes to the world she'd been born into but soon would open them to this particular combination of people, this accumulated and improbable family, this life that had been built from one unremarkable decision on an ordinary winter road. Every single day, he said. The snow continued to fall outside, patient and unhurried, covering all the old tracks,